say what an honor it is at our small camp charting ceremony that we have our Adjutant Richard Smoot, that we have our Texas Division Commander Michael Hurley, and our newly elected Army of the Trans-Mississippi Commander John McCammon, and all of the other guests from the different camps. We thank you so much for making the trip and spending this part of your Saturday to be with us. This time I'd like to present our Army of the Trans-Mississippi Commander John McCammon.
I'd like to bring greetings from the Army of the Trans-Mississippi. It's truly an honor to be here with y'all. Y'all are nice enough to invite me to your camp meeting, and I'd like to say that your camp has already contributed greatly. I'm so proud to be here today, and everybody in the division is looking for good things from you guys, and I know we'll get it. So thank you for inviting me, and the best of luck to all of the members.
All right, last but definitely not least, I want to invite our Texas Division Commander, Michael Hurley. Michael is one of the first people I met at my first reunion. One of the first people, as I was looking lost, to come up and ask me who I was. And instantly there was a friendship that was bonded not just by being in the Sons of Confederate Veterans, but as being a godly man, a Christian man, and you could feel that in his spirit. I'm so thankful that we have a leader who represents Christ, like Michael Hurley does, and tries in everything he does not to just emulate his ancestors, but to emulate the Lord. So this time I want to present Commander Michael Hurley.
Well, I think it's altogether appropriate that we recognize the distinguished visitors that are here, and that would begin with our Army of Trans-Mississippi Commander John McCammon, one whom I greatly admire, and so glad that he's here. We're grateful for your attendance. It's rather rare to have a GEC member attend a local chartering, and although John does live in the area down near San Antonio, it's still an honor to have him in our presence. I promise you the folks from Arkansas, Louisiana don't get that privilege as often as we do. So I want to recognize him. Also want to recognize the Second Lieutenant Brigade Commander of the 7th Brigade, D.W. Davis, who did a great job. And then our commander of the new Saltworks camp, Mr. Michael Oliver. He wanted me to make sure, because I was going to forget. But as John McCammon mentioned, our division was awarded a very prestigious award at our convention. It's the A.P. Hill Award given to the division in the Confederation that had the largest number of new camps chartered in the previous year, and we won that award because of your hard work here in Lampasas. And so I brought the award with me. It has my name on it. I'm not real sure why, but the division itself won the award, and really the better names that might go on this would be Chuck Hand, who is our new commander for the camp in Bernie, and Michael Oliver, who is our new camp commander here in Lampasas. Truly, you guys are the ones that won it. And I took it to their chartering, and I also wanted to bring it to this chartering to make sure to know that you were recognized on the national level for what you're doing. Now, before I get to my remarks, I did think it was appropriate, though, to give you, particularly, I noticed most of our new Saltwork camp members are on my right hand, which is kind of ironic. Everybody wants to be on the right hand of the Lord. Now you're on the right hand of the commander. But with you being new to our organization, I thought it was appropriate to give you a very brief overview of the history of the Texas Division. The Texas Division of the Sons of Confederate Veterans is the flagship division of the Army of the Trans-Mississippi. It was organized first, before any others, in October of 1897. With an organizational meeting held in Dallas, where Mr. Robert K. Gaston, of famed Gaston Avenue, if you know Dallas very well, was elected the 1st Division Commander. The 1st Texas Division reunion was held then in Dallas in 1889, and at that time there were 7 camps in the Texas Division. By 1901, the organization had grown to 36 camps in the Lone Star State, and by 1904, we had grown to 86 camps. 16% of the number of camps in the entire SCV in 1904 were located in Texas. In 1904, the Confederate veteran reported that the Robert E. Lee Camp, number 239 in Fort Worth, which is still meeting, a very active camp in our division, was at that time the largest in the country. Again, this was 1904, with the Robert E. Lee Camp 239 having 1,200 members. The Texas Division continued to grow, and by 1927, the division had reached its peak thus far, although we intend to beat it one day, with over 170 Sons of Confederate veteran camps in the Lone Star State. The division began to wane during the 1930s as the veterans themselves passed on, and the Great Depression came and went, and of course World War II and by 1950, only 5 active members of the Sons of Confederate Veterans could be located in the state of Texas. The division, of course, by that time had all but vanished, along with the brave veterans of whom the members were sons of. The spirit of the Confederacy, however, we're thankful to report, was still alive, and on June 7, 1954, Dr. Ralph W. Widener, Jr. was appointed our division commander, and he spearheaded the reactivation of the Texas Division. And by 2011, the Texas Division had grown to 2,410 members, and today we report right at that same number. We have 96 camps in the state of Texas today, divided into 12 brigades, as John mentioned earlier. Texas has provided for us 23 commanders of the Army of the Trans-Mississippi. With John's election, we had 22. Now we have a 23rd. And 4 commanders-in-chief. The division has hosted 8 national reunions, with the 9th being hosted by the Texas Division this coming summer in Houston in July of 2025. The Texas Division, of course, enjoys a very rich heritage and has produced a strong and vibrant organization thanks to the hard work of the membership of the division, and particularly those men who went before us in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, which revived the organization which we're all part of today. Due to the efforts of all those men who have gone before you and those who will come after you, we trust and believe, the Texas Division shall maintain its place as the largest and the division which began the Army of the Trans-Mississippi Department, and we believe the premier division of all divisions in the Sons of Confederate Veterans. And you gentlemen are being inducted and added to that illustrious role today, and we thank you for it. All right, having said that, brief remarks that I'll have for you. It's so appropriate that the reading of the charge took place earlier. And I thank you so much for having everybody stand while it was read, because it is in many ways our very mission statement. And what's interesting about our organization is that all the decades have gone by since the mission statement was given to us in 1896, but it has needed no improvement nor change because its message is timeless. I'll remind you of the reading of which we just had a few moments ago, where the charge reads as thus: "To you, Sons of Confederate Veterans, we will commit the vindication of the cause for which we fought. To your strength will be given the defense of the Confederate soldier's good name, the guardianship of his history, and the emulation of his virtues, the perpetuation of those principles which he loved and which you love also, and those ideals which made him glorious and which you also cherish. Given to us by Confederate veteran and Commander-in-Chief at the time of the United Confederate Veterans, Lieutenant General Stephen D. Lee, in New Orleans, Louisiana, while convention was going on, April 25th, 1906. Today, all these years later, we, the sons and grandsons, great-grandsons, and for me, and probably several of you, great-great-great-grandsons of the long gray line, gather here in this place to remember and to keep the charge. Ultimately, that is the responsibility of the Saltworks camp. But as we think about the charge, there are 3 simple points we want to make. First, the charge reminds us to vindicate the cause for which they fought. The challenge before me in this speech was to lay out very briefly the political cause for which they fought, because it is a part of the charge, to vindicate the cause for which they fought. I've described it in this way. Secession itself was based upon the belief that each state within the Union was sovereign, a belief passed down by the authors of our Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, and the Bill of Rights. The very men who placed their fortunes, reputations, and personal well-being, and their families and their treasuries, and waged war for independence from the British Empire of King George. Each state then voluntarily bound itself to the union of others for the purpose of mutual defense, perpetuation of commerce among each other, and negotiation with foreign powers. It was never the intention of the majority of the Founding Fathers that the federal government would supersede the power of the state government. Over the 50 years of American history which preceded the war before Southern independence, it became apparent that a majority within the Union unfairly sought to impose upon the state or states that were now found in the minority, i.e. those states in the South, and a failure to recognize the laws within such states, and the practice of economic sanctions, and even the encouragement of insurrection and murder of the Southern people were all part of the cause for which our forefathers stood. It became apparent then to our delegates in the Congress of the United States that a union of which we once joined could no longer remain when the Union did no longer hear the voice of the people of the South, and the rights of her citizens were no longer valued or represented. What would cause, think about this, what would cause these men to leave behind a Union that offered such advantages, and they were many, benefits, and they were great, and ties of affection and admiration which were both enduring and long felt? The answer is simple. Those men had a belief that the people of Texas, for example, were better able to govern themselves than a president in Washington whose focus was on the needs and the desires of the states in the majority, to the detriment, and let me say that again, to the detriment of those states that were found in the minority. This is the political cause for which they fought, and we thus labor to defend and to vindicate. I had a man who was being critical of me for my Confederate flag in my yard who stopped and asked me, "Do you believe what that flag represents?" he said angrily. And I said, "Are you asking me, do I feel like the governor of Texas could better rule Texas than the president in Washington?" The answer is 100% yes. Doesn't that just make common sense? To vindicate the cause for which we fought. Secondly, to give a defense of his good name. One brave Confederate father of ours is a wonderful man by the name of Albert Sidney Johnston, perhaps the greatest of all Texas Confederate generals. He left for us, did he not, a military tradition of courage, patriotism, devotion to duty, and a spirit of self-sacrifice, even giving his own life in defense of Texas, which is truly unequaled in history. The Confederate soldier, by his deeds and valor in field and charity while on the march through enemy territory, has earned the world's admiration. While facing overwhelming numbers of equipment and treasury, he was able to preserve and push the enemy into panic and terror time after time. You don't believe this is true? I wish so much we could interview Union General Joseph Hooker as he ran from the fields of Chancellorsville. What other army, 160 years later, still causes such vehement hatred by our enemies, but one that struck fear in them? And how thankful we should be for the opportunity to give a defense of such a brave group of soldiers. And thirdly, and perhaps for the times in which we live today, the charge says we are to encourage and emulate the virtues and to perpetuate the principles and ideals which made him glorious. My friends, today I'm unhappy to report to you that we live in dangerous times. Not since the days of Reconstruction have we seen such vicious attacks against our Southern culture, traditions, and beliefs. But make no mistake about it, my friends. Ultimately, the goal of our enemies is not simply to stamp out Southern culture, but to remove all vestiges of Christendom and Judeo-Christian way of life. We live in perilous times, and it is up to you and I, we, the sons and daughters of the brave Confederate veterans, who, like they, we must now rise again to face a well-organized and well-funded enemy of political correctness that once again finds itself in the majority, while we who hold to the truth find ourselves in the minority. While these political discussions shouldn't be tied directly to spiritual, it is interesting that Jesus often spoke of the fact that narrow is the way that leadeth to eternal life, but broad is the path that leadeth to destruction. And the point I'm trying to make there is that being right does not necessarily mean you're popular. As a matter of fact, often following the truth will make you one of the most unpopular men in town. Just try running for a national office and be an active, vibrant member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. Good luck to you. because we may not be popular, but I wholly believe and stand before you today in that we hold to the truth. So my encouragement to you is to not grow weary. The charge reminds us of that, does it not? It is our duty to take up the mantle of the very brave forefathers whose blood flows through our veins today, to take up their mantle, to be counted on, no different than those who are now buried in the warm soil of graveyards across this beautiful southern lands. And it is our goal with the establishment of this camp that their memories not be forgotten, and that their deeds will be perpetuated and echoed in our own actions. So finally, let me remind you that the establishment of this camp for the purpose of venerating those who have gone before us is not unique to our culture. In fact, it is often the norm. My fellow Southerners, we don't do something here which is unique. Listen, for example, the grateful people have remembered and venerated their patriot dead across many cultures. Erin, that little land of green that has given more than her fair share of courage to the world, still honors the name of her martyred Michael Collins. Scotland still speaks of the unconquerable Wallace in the face of the overwhelming power of the English king. In England, they still whisper the name in fond memory of the spirit of Churchill, who refused to surrender. In Israel, they remember a slingshot, 5 smooth stones, and the name of a man who became the greatest of Israelite kings, King David. And Sparta, though dead, echoes from her tomb the name of Leonidas. And we, the men and women of the South, may God smile upon our people. May her people remember her martyred dead and speak of their deeds with adoration and with pride. My friends, so long as we remember, so long as we teach our children and our grandchildren of the deeds of men like Lee and Jackson and Forrest and Claiborne, and names of our own Texas heroes, Johnston, Granberry, and Walker, and others, then the future of our way of life shall remain secure, if in no place else, in the memory of her sons and daughters. It is my prayer that peace shall cover their hallowed graves. May laurel wreaths of flowers lie upon their sacred tombs. And may we live our lives, which will be a faithful tribute to that which they were so willingly able and eager to lay before, their lives before, the mantle and the altar of freedom. And finally, I'm thankful to be a part of this wonderful occasion in the most beautiful state in the country, to be reminded of the wonderful deeds of those who have gone before us, that not only we take that pride, but that we act in the same ways that they did. Oh, I'm not saying they're perfect. They had their share of heathens no different than us. But I'm saying emulate the virtues which were good, and learn from the things they did which were bad, no different than every generation which has gone before us, nor our generation when we long lay it down. And go the way of the earth, as the Bible promises, unless Jesus returns while we're yet living. That is my prayer and my encouragement to all of you. All right, let's move on. We now have the real reason that you're here, and that's not to hear the commander speak too long. Gentlemen, I have the honor of calling forth the officers of the camp to begin with. We have the adjutant. We're going to start with James Oliver. Let me move my book here, James. Then we have the color sergeant, Roger Hamrick. We have the chaplain, Jan Hofstetler. Second Lieutenant Commander Stephen Brister. So I'm going to swear them in, then we sign. Is that correct? Gotcha. Thank you. You need your help every day. Second Lieutenant Stephen Brister. Our First Lieutenant Commander Ross Cox Sr. And of course, to my left, your new commander, Mr. Michael Oliver. All right, having said that, gentlemen, we have a very simple swearing-in ceremony today. But I have the privilege of offering this to you, so I'd like to ask if you would simply to raise your right hand. I'm going to read the swearing in, and if you agree with that, you'll say I do. And then I'm going to get to congratulate all of you. So here is the promise we ask you to make. Gentlemen, do you solemnly promise as officers of the Saltworks camp to discharge the duties of your office to the best of your ability and to be governed by the Constitution and the bylaws of the Saltworks Camp 2353, the Sons of Confederate Veterans, Texas Division, and the Sons of Confederate Veterans? If you do, please say, I will.
I will.
And let me congratulate all of you as our first historical officers of the Saltworks Camp. Congratulations, Michael. It's James, right? Yes, sir. Good to see all of you. Thanks for coming. Boy, I tell you, all right, handsome bunch.
Once again, we thank you all for coming and pray that you will have a safe trip home. And thank you all once again. Well, we originally had some options. We were going to name it after the 17th Texas, which was the regiment that came from Lampasas County. Then we thought about naming it after Captain William Banta of the Frontier Regiment. But when the idea came up about the Saltworks, not only was it an interesting story behind the Saltworks, but it also is very unique. There's no other Saltworks camp in the Sons of Confederate Veterans. So when it was taken to a vote by all the members, they really liked the idea of the Saltworks. Plus, that gives us a talking point for historically for the people in and around Lampasas.